Okay, today we're talking about lesson 1.3, and our learning goal that you've written down in your math notebook is to be able to explain patterns when a decimal is multiplied or divided by a power of 10. When it says power of 10, what does that mean we're going to be talking about today? What word should automatically pop into your brain? Like, oh yeah, that's that thing. Junbok? Exponents, yeah. You've seen exponents before. It's when you have that little tiny number up on the upper right-hand corner. That's called an exponent, okay? But first, let's talk about the problem of the day. On page 61, you will see a chart that looks just like this. Now, on this chart on page 61, here we have the number 10, right? How could I fill in the blank here? What factor do I need to multiply 10 by to equal 10? 10 times a DT? 10 times 1 equals 10. Good. Now, if I want to make 100, and you can fill this in your notebook as I'm writing too, I have 10 times what will equal 100? 10 times, Ella? 10. Yeah, you got it. All right. Now, this time, using only 10 as one of your factors, how could you make 1,000? Go ahead and write that in this box right here. You're filling this in as I write. Using only 10 as a factor, how could you multiply to get a product that's 1,000? I could do if I can only use 10s as my factors. So I can't use 100. I would do 10 times
10 times 10 times 2.
Ah. Aruna originally said 10 times 100, but we already know that 100 is 10 times 10. So 10 times 10 times 10 equals 1,000. Okay. How many factors of 10 did we multiply to get to 1,000? Truth? We used 3. 1, 2, 3. Good. Now, how many factors of 10 do we need in order to multiply in order to get 10,000? What multiplication sentence could I write using only 10 as a factor in order to make 10,000? Itai? 4? 10? How many factors of 10 did we have to use to multiply to get to 10,000? Ziv? 4. Okay, good. Now, how many zeros are in our product of 10,000? How many zeros are there in 10,000? Kevin? 4. And how many times did we have to multiply 10 to get to 10,000? Interesting. Okay. What if I wanted to multiply to get 100,000? Go ahead and write the multiplication sentence using only 10 as a factor that you would need in order to get 100,000. How many factors of 10 did you just say, Sherilyn? 5. How many zeros are there in 100,000? There's 5 zeros and 5 10s that I need to multiply. What patterns are you noticing? Talk to your table group. So we're noticing that the products have the same number of zeros. This one has 5 as the number of zeros in the factors. Interesting. What if I wanted to make 1 million? How many zeros are there in the product of 1 million? How many zeros are there, Michael?
6.
6. So what do you predict? How many zeros do I need in the factors?
10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10.
How many times did you just say 10?
6.
Yeah. So I need 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. 6 times. Good. I want everyone to write in their math notebook this word, exponents. Oh, an exponent represents how many times we use 10 as a factor. So if I look at here for 100, if I'm using 10, how many times did I use 10 as a factor? 2. So I can rewrite that as 10 to the power of 2. The small 2 tells you how many times you're multiplying the number 10. Let's look at 1,000. How many times did I multiply 10? 3. So what should the exponent be? 10 to the power of 3. Good. Okay, so go ahead and fill this in your chart as well. What about for 10,000? How many times did I use 10 as a factor? Alona, how many times for 10,000 did I use 10 as a factor? 4. So what should the exponent be? 4. So it's the same as 10 to the 4th power. Go ahead and fill this in. You did. Good. What about for 100,000? How many times did I use 10 as a factor? Ella? 5. So it should be 10 to the power of? 5. Good. And finally for 1 million Junebok, it should be 10 to the power of?
6.
Okay. What about for 10? How many times did I use 10 as a factor? 1. So it's actually 10 to the power of 1. Here are some typical fails I see when we're talking about exponents. And I'm going to tell you about them right now so we turn them from fails into fabulous fails. Sometimes when people are writing exponents, they write 10 to the power of 2, like that. Now, is it very clear that this is 10 to the power of 2?
No.
What does it look like it might be? 102. And so could that get really confusing either for your teacher who's grading your work or for you when you're doing your math calculations? So what could we do to avoid this fail and just make it a fabulous fail instead? Aaliyah?
You can make it a little bit smaller and a little bit more up so it's not as close to 0.
Yeah, so you want to make sure you're writing it in the upper right-hand corner and you're writing it small so it's very clear. Now, if I were to write this, how could I calculate what 10 to the power of 2 is equal to? What is the little 2 telling you? What information is that little exponent telling you? Ella? It tells you how many times to multiply your base number. It tells you that 10 should be used 2 times as a factor. But you know what a lot of people do? They sometimes get confused and they think that 10 to the power of 2 is equal to 10 times 2. Does that have the same value as 10 to the power of 2? No. So this is a fabulous fail I see a lot, and this is a fabulous fail I see a lot. Can you see why people might make those mistakes though?
Yeah.
Okay, but by knowing about those mistakes, now you will never make that mistake again, right? Good. If we know that the number of zeros in the product is the same as the number of zeros in the factors, which is the same as the number of the exponent, if a Google has 100 zeros, Dhruv, what should I write? 1 Google equals 10 to the power of 100. How did Dhruv know? Did he write out a Google and then count them?
No.
How did he know that 1 Google equals 10 to the power of 100? Ben?
Because of exponents.
Can you explain a little bit more?
You do exponents,
Uh-huh.
10 to the power of, and then the number that you put in is 10.
Mm-hmm.
And for Google, it's 10 to the power of 100.
Yeah, because we know from looking at the patterns that the exponent tells you how many zeros there would be. So in a Google, how many zeros are there?
100.
100. So that's why the exponent needs to be 100.